Thank you, Ottaviano. Wow, that's something that has to sink in with all the charts and everything. It's yeah, and then I wonder what is Sergio's take on all this. This is lots of information, so let's try to unpick it, kind of, bit by bit.
Well, okay, thank you, Margaret, and thanks you and Canuto for the invitation. What an honor to be discussing Canuto's presentation. I'll be very brief, as we agreed. I'll max 5-10 minutes, and I will not focus so much on the enormous amount of data and information that Canuto presented. I will talk mostly about the climate problem itself, and the political economy of this transition. The two things to just put us straight into some of the challenges, because I mean, to start with, all of this looks so nice in a graph, whether it is more or less monotonic or not. The fact is that it's all completely unrealistic. I mean, let's face it. Yeah, anyone who's been following up the discussions of the UNFCCC, the Convention of the United Nations on Climate, every COP there is a new agreement. Of course, Paris and Kyoto are the two main ones, but emissions continue to just grow linearly, beautifully, and nothing happens. You see the impacts of these agreements so far. If you didn't know what was happening down here, you would say, Jesus, nothing's happening at all. The figure I like to use is that, okay, the meetings to agree on what we need to do is inviting every country except planet Earth. Planet Earth is not represented there. So it's just getting ill. The temperature is just rising also linearly, as you can see. We are already at 1.2. And it's just we're leaving the planet a little worse to our descendants. Okay, this is the most that we are thinking long term, rather than more serious economics about, okay, what needs to be done. So there is a very, very big mismatch between climate urgency and the numbers that the costs and the efforts that we think are enormous, and we see what Canuto presented us. It's all of this is not achievable. I mean, it's thinking seriously. It's not attainable by any means. Whether it is the minerals, but it's not that. The issue is really the political commitment, the overall understanding of what's on the table. And what I think is the most important issue is the distributional impact and the equity issues on the climate challenge. The figure I like is, again, I think in Brazil or any other country, India is a good example. We all seen pictures of these people going to work, packed up on the trains, the suburban trains, one on top of the other, people surfing on top of the train, and people holding one hand outside the train, etc. And we're talking about electric vehicles. So it's a huge, enormous discompass between the reality, what is the world's challenges? What is the difficulty here? It's not to transform an internal combustion engine motor in a vehicle to an electric. That's peanuts. The challenge is, okay, we need to put 3 billion people every day from suburban areas to urban areas. People who don't have a train, don't have a bus, don't have a car, there's no access. It's enormously expensive. These people don't have the water, they don't have the sanitation, it's all completely inadequate, unacceptable, etc. And we need to move, as Canuto pointed out, we need to make huge investments. I mean, I don't think he put the number, but the McKinsey number, just to quote one of them, we're talking about $375 trillion until 2050, which is about $9 trillion every year, additional to the existing efforts to go to those monotonic decreasing curves. Is this where the money should be going? Or should it be going to, okay, first, let's put these people, let's give the right to these people to just go to work. First, if they find a job, and second, when they find a job, let them have a train that you can sit and you don't risk your life, and you have an alternative to, you know, to move, etc. So it is the basic needs. Mozambique, I'm currently working on a climate strategy for Mozambique. I mean, what is there for Mozambique to talk about climate change? I mean, of course, there are huge opportunities in the red, you know, the reduction of deforestation, etc. Mozambique needs to do its best. But come on, let's be serious. Should it be in the agenda? Shouldn't all of these curves, sincerely, I mean, the provocation is this. Let's leave the 20 poorest, the probably 100, I don't know what the number of countries should be, but there is a certain break point where we can all discuss. Let's leave these countries aside from the climate change discussion. They shouldn't even be sitting on the table. Let them grow as they can. It's going to be already huge. It is already a huge challenge. They don't come to grips with it to even come close to developed countries. And let the G20 resolve the problem. It's only 20 countries on the table, and they can resolve 80%. They have 80% of emissions, and they have the resources anyway, and they're going to have to pay in the end. So, sorry a bit long about this. Okay, it's the political economy of how difficult it is for this transition to take place. Canuto asked me to talk about one thing also, just to mention on the regulatory part, since we're talking about a bit of this a global agreement. A major bump is you know, we see just now, as Canuto mentioned, the Ukrainian war, etc. I mean, countries are still going back to coal. So I mean, there's no need to say anything anymore. You know, just okay. The priority still, it's not on the table. I mean, if climate change was serious, it wasn't on the table. The World Bank, back to our Canuto, me and Canuto's house. I mean, the World Bank is not financing fossil fuels new exploration. I mean, let's be serious here. Mozambique has just found out huge amount of gas reserves in the northern part of the country. Well, Mozambique cannot exploit this gas that will resolve 50%, it represents roughly 50% of GDP and exports, etc. It cannot export that, doesn't find the financing for that because the world is stopping funding for fossil fuels. And suddenly Germany is burning coal because there is a war somewhere. So I mean, it's ludicrous. The political economy of this thing is still not on the table. Nobody is serious. The rich countries, they are prepared. True again, you know, this is another inequality. The rich countries are prepared. The most vulnerable city in the world is Miami, okay? Miami is the most vulnerable city to climate change. Guess what? They don't care. The city is already, I mean, for various reasons, I mean, it's very much exposed because, you know, it's the entry of the Gulf Stream, the Gulf of Mexico, it's in the current of all the hurricanes, etc. But the city was built on top of the glaciers. It's totally artificial and totally prepared. Now let's go to Bangladesh. Okay, you have 50 million people in the lowlands just off the Indian Ocean, subject to, and that is a problem. For them, it is obviously a very serious problem. So the inequalities is the theme, I think. Inequality is the theme here. One word on deforestation, since I'm Brazilian and I worked extensively on, just for a taste of what it is. In my short 66 years of life, everything we try to understand in terms of history is about, we somehow find some economic justification in the background. Anything you find, I mean, it's because of economic incentives or looking for gold or looking for whatever. People go to war and history is written about conquering here and there. The destruction of the Amazon, I sincerely don't find there is no logic. We can't find a logic for deforestation in the Amazon. It's a completely ununderstandable. And I really need help here, because here in Brazil, as a Brazilian, there is not even the most primitive logic, which is, okay, we deforest to put cattle and a couple of good crops like soybeans, etc. Not even that holds. It's totally unprofitable. We have much, much better lands closer to the markets in the savanna areas of Brazil. It doesn't make absolutely just any sense. And the losses we are incurring, they're just astronomical. No need to say about what it represents today to have this richness of such a biodiversity and a pool of, when Canuto is talking about how important it is, nickel and cobalt and manganese and the rare earths, etc. Now these are minerals, deposits, non-renewables. Think about the richness of the plants and fibers and fruits and everything which is in the jungle. A jungle of, bigger than the entire Europe in terms of biodiversity. So the amount of stuff that we can get from these, and we don't have the slightest idea of what's in there. And just burning to put cattle, one animal per hectare, which is, it's a complete absurd phenomena, ununderstandable. The last thing is the carbon pricing. Canuto mentioned, just for your, assuming people are not familiar with the numbers, $100 ton tax on carbon roughly means 25 cents per liter of gasoline. That's roughly the number. $100, and we currently the markets are on the order of, depends. There's a huge difference in prices, but we're roughly now around $5, $10. And so in Europe, it's much higher. It's about 20, 30, but globally, we would average it at something like 5. So we're so far from what needs to be done. And there's no question, we economists, it's ridiculous even to talk about, there's no solution without carbon pricing. It's a non-start, right? It's without giving this basic signal to the economy that, something is wrong here, you cannot just keep doing things without signaling. It's not going to be through just regulation and agreements, etc. Put a price, end of story. It's the most cost-effective way of bringing optimality here. And so, again, why are we not pricing it? Why doesn't the UNFCCC come with a strong hand on this? Say, listen, that's it. It's going to cost, and it's going to signal to the economy. And then we're going to incur the cost of, okay, we pay developing countries, no problem. It's cheap, but it's going to be very cost effective. So just raising issues. I'm sorry, Margaret, if I was a little longer than expected, just throwing crazy things in the air.
No, just go on. This is very interesting. That's what we need. We need to, put a wrench in the wheel there.
Okay. Well, but I think this is it. Happy to discuss. I probably missed a few things, but happy to discuss just a few provocations for maybe go back to Canuto or to yourselves or to people. I don't know. You take it from there.
That's very strong. What you said is extremely, very, very potent. And actually interesting, in our last installment last month, I came up with some demographics that show, as you said, that the countries that dictate, let's leave it to the G20. So let's leave it to the rich countries. And I kind of demonstrated the number of people, how many million of people lives in these countries, and the 6.5 billion versus roughly 760 million in the developing countries. So that's the point of peril. So this is how we are going to solve the human problem on Earth, by allowing them to be drowned. You're talking about Miami, you're talking about Bangladesh. Those are the countries that are big swaths with the global warming. They will basically, land will cease to exist. will be covered by water, and very quickly too. And I think the heat waves and the fact that there is a fire burning around London, there is the entire Europe burning, maybe that will wake up the rich countries, because they will have to pay a huge price for doing nothing. So maybe this will, bring us somehow over to balance it out. And the agenda of the people is cost of energy. Everybody is saying cost of energy. So long-term effects must be found. Long-term effects for the energy crisis. We must find a solution to that with the governments. Otherwise, they will not be governments for long. So how to provide that most efficient market arrangement to promote decarbonization is surely will have to be driven by the rich countries, because they are going to pay the most right now, but it is a global problem because it cannot be any more fixed on the one singular point, me, my country, and I alone. It is a global problem. We are in it, all of us. We are drowning in it or burning, whichever, at whichever respective parts of the globe we are. But this is for all of us. Ottaviano, what do you have to add to it?
I appreciate it very much, as I expected. Very acute and precise comments and remarks by Sergio, and he's right. What I presented and what these institutions try to make is a sort of a template, but we have to be conscious that the word does not cross on optimum paths. Does not walk on the optimal scenarios, particularly forget the net zero carbon emission scenario, which, as we saw, seems very, very particularly out of reach. I picked three important things from what you both spoke. First of all, the point made by Sergio on the asymmetry of conditions. There has to be an acknowledgement of the asymmetry of conditions between the rich countries, mostly responsible for the amount of the gas, the greenhouse gas that are there, right? And in order to alleviate, let's say, to mitigate the burden of the cost of the transition to developing countries. And by the way, the rich countries, the advanced economies, have not fulfilled their pledges, right? They have not complied with what they had promised in the previous negotiations. That's the first point, and he's right. Another one, adding to the deforestation, the comments on deforestation by Sergio. Look, besides the contribution to climate change, negative contribution from the Amazon deforestation, in terms of reducing the role of the Amazon as a carbon sink, as well put by two scientists that both Sergio and I know, one Brazilian, Carlos Nobre, and another one who died last year, with whom we had many contacts because he lived in Washington. They both pinpoint one thing. The Amazon deforestation may be a shot on Brazil's own food, because the Amazon is unique, and Sergio, correct me if I'm mischaracterizing the argument. The Amazon forest is unique in the sense that the water released by the Amazon, unlike other tropical forests, does not go to the sea. Part of it hits on the Andean hills, and they come down to the southern part of Brazil, to the central west, and it's an important component, an important fact behind Brazil's agricultural dynamism. So if by any chance the deforestation cross over some tipping point, Brazil's agriculture will be doomed. See, of course, no one has a perfect scientific estimate for what would be the threshold, but there are even those who think that we have already may have crossed it, right, Sergio? Is a motivation strong enough to deter definitely the pace of a deforestation? And third, all right, the heat waves have also already affected the food production since last year. And think of what happened to the western part of the U.S. with frequent droughts and so on, affecting the production of corn and so on. Let's think of what happened to India this year, where the wheat belt had to be harvested and to be seasoned, facing 45 Celsius degrees of temperature on the ground. So it's not only Europe, other parts of advanced economies are also already facing the consequence. Thank you.
Yes, and before we break into the question period, I would like to add one more thing on the subject of fantasy climate denial. We will have problems with migration, and we are not talking about migration from the poor countries to rich countries. We are also talking about migration from rich countries to any place on earth that is livable. Cost of living crises are starting to become unbearable in the rich countries. Climate is starting to become unbearable. Unsustainable agricultural conditions, they are going to be a huge factor in that. We have droughts. Entire swaths of Europe, me being born in Poland, living in Poland. Poland is probably in the worst hydrological situation in Europe. And then we talk about water scarcity. We cannot live without water. So the rich countries are not going to fare much better, while some parts of the world, the poorer parts, will be drowning in raising water levels, which is the water that is undrinkable. The other parts will not have enough water to drink, to sustain themselves. So migration all the way around. And with that, I would like to open the questions.